Let us begin. As I said at the top, the failure of Kraven literally needs to be studied. So let's go over it. Box office. Kraven the Hunter bombs with $11 million opening weekend. Worst start of Sony-produced Marvel films. Kraven, maybe the world's greatest hunter, but the comic book villain couldn't manage to climb to the top of box office charts. Sony's Kraven the Hunter, a superhero spin-off starring Aaron Taylor Johnson as Spider-Man's notorious foe, launched behind already low expectations at number 3 with $11 million from 3,211 theaters. It landed the worst debut for Sony's universe of Marvel characters behind February's misfire, Madam Web, which made $15.3 million. As well as some of the franchise's lowest ever marks from critics and audiences, with a Shakespearean tragedy of 15% on Rotten Tomatoes and a C grade on CinemaScore. Now, I want to just take a second here because we had a little discussion in the Discord yesterday. Some people were like, I don't even understand why it's a C. That seems like high for what people are saying about the film. So a C CinemaScore is one of the lowest cinema scores you will ever see. Okay? And this has to do with like confirmation bias. So the critics, their score is usually going to be just reflective of what they perceive to be the quality. Aggregate is usually pretty accurate to like how people feel about the movie. Audience score, that's usually a lot higher than the critic score, just in general, not always, but in general, higher than the critic score. And the cinema score, which is one of the best scores we have because of the way they do it. They're literally asking people as they're leaving the theaters, right? And it's instead of like what Rotten Tomatoes does, which is people go home, fill out a thing. I think you have to verify that you had a ticket now, and then you can, give your audience score to the film. The cinema score is like you just watched the movie, you're coming out, somebody's there with a clipboard, they're getting your shit. Okay? So cinema scores usually pretty high. Like a B cinema score is considered pretty bad because the logic is all of these people, they paid to see this movie. They usually are like, well, I'm not an idiot. I wouldn't pay to see something that's absolutely crap. And so the confirmation bias kicks in and they give it a higher than usual score. Okay? C as a cinema score? Abysmal. Abysmal, guys. Okay? That kind of reception signals that barring a holiday miracle, which we know Adam Fanjexer is holding out for, Kraven won't rebound over the rest of December. Kraven the Hunter is Sony's third Spider-Man adjacent adaptation of the year. Following October's Venom the Last Dance, the Alien symbiote trilogy led by Tom Hardy has proven itself to be critic-proof and commercially successful. Although the third and final movie didn't live up to the box office heights of its predecessors, Sony has otherwise yet to produce a comic book hit from its offshoots led by tertiary Spider-Man baddies. What the hell? Tertiary? The studio also stumbled in 2022 with Morbius, a vampire-inspired thriller with Jared Leto as the fanged villain, another one of Peter Parker's infamous enemies. These ambitions began at a time when superheroes were all the rage at the box office, but ticket sales for too many recent comic book tentpoles have been decidedly earthbound. The long-delayed Kraven, I think it was delayed over 4 different times, cost an upward of $110 million to produce. It was greenlit for 90, but then ballooned after the writer strikes and the actor strikes. Though it was co-financed by TSG, directed by J.C. Chandor, the R-rated film explores the origins of Sergei Kravenov, the comic book character, the alter ego, including a rocky relationship with crime lord father Russell Crowe in his quest to become the greatest hunter. As the superhero genre has declined over the last 5 years, Morbius, Madam Web, and Kraven have led the race to the bottom, says David A. Gross, who runs the movie consulting firm Franchise Entertainment Research. Kraven's budget was downsized according to the realities of the market, but it's still too high for this kind of result. Now they go on to talk about War of the Rohim, which also really underperformed. But we're going to just stick into the Kraven aspect of this story for now. Okay, so Kraven, incredible bump. This puts it in the conversation for one of the lowest comic book movie openings of all time. So technically, there are some real stinkers out there. I looked this up earlier. So you had Howard the Duck, which opened in 1986 for $5 million. Pretty freaking bad. The New Mutants in 2020, which was pretty much forgotten, opened at $7 million. Punisher Warzone with Ray Stevenson, may he rest in peace, $4.2 million. So a lot higher than some of the worst we've ever seen, but it's the worst that Sony has ever done, right? It's the worst they've ever done. And the second worst they ever did was earlier this year with Madam Web. So like they're having a very rough time of it. Even with Venom 3 doing decent, which kind of shocked us all. Like frankly, I'm still kind of shocked about it, and I enjoyed that film, but I can't believe it's actually doing those numbers. Even with that, Sony's looking at an absolutely terrifying year for their comic book, okay? Now, it seems like the studio is at least aware that this shit ain't working, okay? We had an article in the Wrap last week before the movie even came out. This article is kind of indicating they're not doing this anymore, okay? But there were like a lot of conflicting reports that came out over the weekend, right? Some people were saying, oh, they will be back. They'll be back to their old shenanigans. Alex Perez chiming in on a little bit saying like, yeah, they have an opportunity to reboot. There was an article saying that Sony wants to take this stuff more seriously and they want to put a Spider-Man in there, which opened up a ton of conversations about like, should it be Andrew Garfield? Should it be Tobey Maguire? Should it be a newcomer? And there was also, on top of all of that, another article which was asking the question basically of why Spider-Man had not been in these movies. Because I think one thing that's just super clear and obvious is that all of these movies would have done better with Spider-Man. Okay? Many of you even asked me last week, like, what's the deal here? Like, why wasn't there Spider-Man? And I had speculated that this was something to do with Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios. And I based this on a couple of different rumors. Like, there was a rumor by John Schnepp that Tom Holland shot a scene for Venom 1, but ultimately Kevin Feige didn't like it and ended up taking it out of the movie. According to an article in Deadline, there was no stipulation within the contract that they have with Marvel Studios that said that Sony could not have Spider-Man. And we know that they've tried different things. Like, remember the first couple trailers for Morbius where you had the Spider-Man that said traitor and he was like on the wall in graffiti? And there was originally an attempt to have Michael Keaton in the Morbius movie proper, seemingly setting it in the 616, right? You know, there were rumors that the Venom 3 movie was going to have a young Peter Parker. They ended up taking that out of it. There were rumors Andrew Garfield was going to be involved with that. Don't know if that ever came to fruition. There were major rumors in Madam Web. And I remember Jeff Steiner broke this news and Sony got really mad at him. But Sony did this thing where they were like, okay, we're going to connect it to Toby. No, we'll connect it to Tom Holland. Then they looked over all of that stuff and realized it didn't match up with either of them. And so their solution was just to cut and sort of edit around it. So, you know, again, according to Deadline, Sony just had the chance and botched it. I can kind of believe that. I mean, if you look at how inept they have been, it's not too hard to believe that they just totally screwed that up, right? But I also think if you look at like Venom, Venom 2, even Venom 3, there's obviously some plan, something that they've been building. I tend to believe that Kevin was like dangling stuff in front of them and that ultimately Kevin was super protective of what Tom Holland would actually show up in because Tom Holland is the MCU Spider-Man. So I guess I just want to say that like the official statement, because like, guys, this is crazy. Kraven was so bad and it bombed so poorly that Sony's been scrambling. And we've seen a ton of different reports coming out, trying to explain stuff, trying to signal that they are changing things, all these different things. It just seems like they're really in panic mode. And we're getting all of this information. And one of the pieces of information came out in that Deadline article. And it was basically like, no, we weren't restricted. We just didn't think people wanted Spider-Man. Oh, my God. So, look, I've got a big detailed video on this where I'm going to like go into like all the different things that were said and kind of try to make sense of it, right? But it seems like either way, something has to change, you know, and they're going to change it. Hopefully they can change it in a way that's more congruent with like what Marvel Studios does. Maybe they'll just get back to their old shenanigans with a new Spider-Man, and we'll just see how that goes. But either way, the bombing of Kraven the Hunter must be studied. This is wild, man. And Sony really thought they had something here. I mean, I kind of feel bad. Like, I personally think, and it's funny to say because like I don't think I'm going to watch this movie ever. But I remember in the lead up to it and things that I was hearing behind the scenes, Sony was pretty confident in Kraven. Like they think it's good. They think it might be one of the best things they've ever made. But the audience obviously disagrees. I mean, dude, you had people coming out and flaming this movie. That cinema score is horrible. That box office is terrible. Like, this is the biggest, like, slap in the face that could happen to a studio when they're making stuff like this. So, that's the report. I mean, we knew it was going to do poorly. But my God, 12 to 15 was the projections. We thought that was terrible. It literally came in lower than the already low box office expectations. This is mind-blowing stuff. Mind-blowing stuff. So, there you have it.